Good evening, everybody. You're synchronized to researchroadshow.com. Today is January 11th, 2023, and it's been kind of a long day for the rest of us here at Neighborhood News, Research Roadshow. As you saw on the front page, on the holding page that I had up, Harry the Greek has been terminated from Patreon. And this is a sad bit of news, but not totally unexpected. We knew that Patreon had been infiltrated by some of the usual suspects already 2 years ago. But it's still, nonetheless, it's a major hit to Harry and the amount of traffic that he's going to get for the next few weeks. The primary reason I think that he was taken down was his coverage of the Konnech situation, the Eugene Yu trial in Los Angeles, the goings-on in Lansing with the shutdown of Konnech offices there, Donna Wang selling their house and moving back to China, well, presumably out of the country anyway. As I said at the beginning of the show yesterday, this is a big deal, and I'm going to present part 2 covering the ties, the links to the abortion industry, or what, better yet, if you are a quote unquote patriot and you love how America used to be, and one of your issues is the reduction of the number of abortions in America, especially forced abortions, then you need to pay attention to the Eugene Yu case, and more to the point, you have to do the work required to get other people in your neighborhood or your coworkers interested in this case so that you can form small groups within your state to coalesce, to gather together, to form a committee that actively goes after the roots of this case, or the principles on the very shaky platform that our republic is standing on right now. Let's start with let's go back to square one. The American Eugenics Society has been in the news a couple of times the past few months. The American Eugenics Society supposedly started in 1921 and ran up until 1939, but that's not precise. The eugenics as a practice, using science to better the physical condition or mental condition of a group of human beings, starts roughly, as far as I can tell, in 1820, when slaveholders, not just in America, this is not just an American thing, when slaveholders around the world started to compete to see who could breed the best slave. And they would actively take some of the stronger males and pair them with certain members of the female slave community, and to hopefully bring about healthier, stronger slaves that could work in the heat or in the extreme cold for the other regions for hours and hours per day, and not suffer great fatigue and not become sick too often, and therefore they would be more productive. The same kind of mentality applies to automotive manufacturers around the world. You want to see what conditions, what parameters can you change to get more productivity per week, build more cars, more trucks per week out of a given factory, okay, or within a given set of limiting conditions, boundary conditions. So it was more of a business. There was more of a business mentality, kind of mean, I would say, but it wasn't strictly a racial kind of thing. I know that sounds odd to say, but I'm saying that their way of competing with each other, the slaveholders, plantation owners in the US, would compete with each other in order to breed a healthier, stronger slave so that they would be more profitable. And, it's a question of one-upmanship. Now, a lot of people talk about Darwin. When was it, 1857, when Darwin wrote his famous book on the betterment of the species, or the survival of the fittest. I forget the exact title. Forgive me. But Darwin came along at just the right time, because who was it that made sure that Darwin's manuscript got a lot of airtime? Or they didn't have TV back then, but who made sure that there were hundreds of thousands of copies of Darwin's book printed so that his ideas could be circulated throughout the general public and the scientific community in particular? It was this group of people, these guys who were convinced that they could better the human condition and reduce the number of social illnesses through the use of science, the applied use of science. And it was sadly the eugenics movement, especially in the UK and Northern Europe, that pushed the envelope, so to speak, in the area of scientific discovery. Many areas of chemistry, many areas of the hard physics were furthered by the eugenics movement. And I'm going to start by talking about two prominent members of that movement in the early 1910s, 1920s. The first one is, I'm sorry, I didn't even put that up. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to pull up the page for the American Eugenics Society, which has changed its name. The Wikipedia title, American Eugenics Society, no longer appears, but they still mention, the page has a new name, and in the third paragraph, they mention the American Eugenics Society, which was part of Eugenics International. So now Wikipedia calls it the Society for Biodemography and Social Biology. I know this is a long route to getting to Eugene Yu, but bear with me here. The Society for Biodemography and Social Biology, formerly known as American Eugenics Society, is dedicated to furthering the discussion, advancement, and dissemination of knowledge about biological and social cultural forces which affect the structure and composition of human populations. Sounds a lot like certain things we're hearing in Davos lately, right? Or for the past 6 years. Sounds very similar. So they were dedicated, since 1820, they were dedicated to this idea that using science, we could improve the human condition. We would be happier, everyone, not just the slave populations. Everyone would be happier and healthier if we could just figure out scientifically what was wrong, especially with man's brain. Okay, enough on that. So one of the more prominent individuals in the eugenics movement between 1907 roughly and 1933 was a gentleman called Alfred Pickard Sloan. So let's pull up his page on Wikipedia. Remember, Wikipedia doesn't always get it right. There are certain things that they conveniently omit. For example, sometimes they forget to mention in the case of a person, a notable figure, they forget to mention his or her father, or mother. Okay, and that will come up in a future example. So here we have, I don't know if you can see that, we have Alfred P. Sloan, who, by the way, was is the namesake and the major benefactor up until his death of the Alfred P. Sloan School of Mismanagement in Boston. Mr. Sloan was, as you all know, the head of GM, General Motors, for many years, and he was also good friends with different members of the DuPont family and Rockefeller family. The DuPonts, oddly enough, have gotten by in our channels with very little damage. But the DuPonts and the Native Americans in the Chesapeake Bay area know this very well. The DuPonts were an interesting bunch of fellows. Let's put it that way, okay? And they drove the eugenics movement harder than anyone, okay? They were the guidon bearers for the eugenics movement in America, at least in America. Now, Mr. Sloan, let's go down the page a little bit. Mr. Sloan was kind of obsessed with the idea of productivity. We have to make people productivity. We have to have, and it says right there, as you on the entrance to the Alfred P. Sloan School, that the institute is dedicated to the advancement of knowledge, which will make people more productive, something like that. And every factory that he worked at, or every factory that he oversaw prior to becoming president of GM, he stressed the use of scientific methods to study the behaviors of the workers in the factories and to see if there were ways that they could improve their performance, not excluding the use of these newfangled medicines or things like I think heroin was tried. I can't don't quote me on that. Maybe it wasn't heroin. It was some drug that is a problem today, or was in the 1990s, and we thought it was the use of this drug started in the 1990s, but it actually turned out to be in the 1920s at some of Sloan's factories. Okay, it's right here. I did not know this. The MIT building E62, where I've spent thousands and thousands of hours, is here on the page. All right. And a lot of the therapeutics companies that we'll be talking about later in the week, a lot of the, how would you call them? The life sciences companies that are going to be very much in the news after, in light of the COVID information that is coming out. A lot of those therapeutics companies, biological companies, were started here in building E62. All right, so why am I going on about Mr. Alfred P. Sloan? Because at the time, at its peak in 1934, the American Eugenics Society had 35,000 card-carrying members, okay? And they don't tell you that in the history books. It was very in vogue, especially between 1880 and 1920. It was very in vogue to be in this club, the American Eugenics Society. Everybody who was anybody was in this club because there was no internet, there was no Netflix. Everyone talked about how could we solve all of these social problems, and the eugenics argument was the one catching the most wind. They thought that, you know, and Alfred P. Sloan is a perfect example. Everybody in Boston loved him. because he was showing that we could use science to better the human condition. Okay, so let's jump to a more modern day problem. Anyway, the spirit of Alfred P. Sloan lives on, and I should say that right here at the entrance to the Alfred P. Sloan building, there is an 11-foot painting of Mr. Sloan during his heyday in General Motors. It's the largest painting I've ever seen of an industrialist. Anyway, that's beside the point. Mr. Sloan was known as a philanthropist, but I should mention that part of his philanthropy went to a group in New York City that eventually became known as the Sloan Kettering Memorial Health Clinic, right? And I know Mark Kulak has talked a lot about the Sloan Kettering Clinic down there in New York City. So I'll defer to him on the specifics of that topic. But the Sloan's philanthropy had always something to do with, it was always skewed towards eugenics, right? And later euphenics. Now let's get. I know all of you are impatient and want me to get to my main point. Mr. William Gates, better known as Bill Gates, has been in the news lately, especially in India. Mr. Gates, in fact, Mr. Bill Gates has been banned from setting foot on Indian soil for the next few years because of his work, the work that he continues for his father, Bill Gates Sr. So let's bring up the Wikipedia for Mr. Gates. William Henry Gates II, better known as Bill Gates Sr. Here again, Mr. Gates was a well-known member, one of the top members of the Eugenics Society in his 40s and 50s. And he donated a lot of money to these various institutions. Oh, let's talk briefly about Women's Lib. Women's Lib was a eugenics play. Not many people are aware of that, but not all of them, but a high percentage of the various Women Libs movements, or the various organizations and associations that had as part of their charter the liberation of American women, got their funding from Mr. Gates and other eugenicists like Warren Buffett. And the reason being was they knew that these liberated women would be outside the house more often, and it would lead to further social problems, especially affecting the kids, and that the kids would have, it always has to do with the breakup of the family, right? Or with the reduction in the number, or making sure in the argument of the eugenicist would be that healthier, stronger women who had a much better head on their shoulders would have more kids, more healthy kids. So the genes would be passed down. It's ethnic cleansing. Making sure that only intelligent, above all intelligent, doesn't matter the skin color, intelligent, healthy, and noble, altruistic people have more children than those. The type of person that often wound up in jail, in fact, as Mark pointed out a couple weeks ago, up until 1952, some states still sterilized inmates if they were too violent. I did not know that. And it's outrageous In 1952, some states were still sterilizing men that they thought were dangerous and that they should not have children because they didn't want their behavior to be passed on. Okay, so let's stop talking about Mr. Gates for now. I just want to point out that the Eugenics Society, a lot of people think that, well, in 1940, the Eugenics Society was disbanded and it just disappeared. Well, what we call today Planned Parenthood or Planned Unparenthood is merely the third rebranding of the American Eugenics Society, or of one spinoff. The overall movement, what I'm trying to get across is that if you are against Planned Parenthood, especially the funding of Planned Parenthood with American taxpayer dollars, you have to understand that they weren't content just to stop at Planned Parenthood. There were many other activities, many of them getting tax dollars, that you should also be concerned with, okay? For example, a lot of people do not understand that the Council on Foreign Relations was the major force behind Planned Parenthood in its early days. And I've talked to a great many people in Ohio and Massachusetts that know about Planned Parenthood. They have very big issues with Planned Parenthood, especially the selling of organs to very rich kids, to very rich people whose newborns have defective hearts. But they don't know about the Council on Foreign Relations and how the mechanisms through which they provided the backstop for Planned Parenthood. Okay, so how does all of this tie into the Eugene Yu trial? Why is that important? Let's look at the Roe versus Wade argument for a bit. Roe versus Wade did not happen overnight. It took many, many years because it was based on precedents, right? There were dozens of precedents called into the argument during the presentation for the pro-abortion case. But each of those precedents took years, and in each of those cases, the usual suspects had to bide their time. They had to wait, find the right case, in the right state, in order to make a step forward in this plan that would eventually turn into Roe versus Wade. So I think it took around 50 years, roughly. They started in the mid-1920s, making sure that certain cases made their way up to the higher courts, and that certain other cases where it was more of a pro-life argument, making sure that those cases did not get boosted, so that those cases would not become precedent. So it was they were using all of their power and pelf to maneuver certain cases in a certain direction, all aimed at this peaking and making sure between 1967 and 1973, making sure to get the right people on the bench. Let's not forget that. But it was a crescendo, very, very meticulous, always making sure that the right cases got boosted in order to give us Roe versus Wade did not happen overnight. That's what I'm trying to say. It was the culmination of a long, serious effort to get those precedents established. So in the Eugene Yu case, what this does is this blows open the whole issue of whether or not Americans are in control of their judicial system. Okay? We're very proud of the fact that in Europe, most judges are appointed, but the American people elect their judges, especially for the Superior Court and for the state Supreme Courts and for the U.S. Supreme Court. We take great pride in that. Now, the Eugene Yu case forces us to examine. First of all, it forces us to examine our hearts, but it forces us to examine this idea that's been, it was driven into me firmly by the time I was 18. This idea that we choose our judges because we know them to be honorable men and women who stand up for every line of the Constitution, and that they would never, ever, especially, they might join the local water buffalo club like Fred Flintstone does, but they would never join a secret society like Skull and Bones, for example. The Eugene Yu case forces us to question these fundamental assumptions about our judicial system and how these, and if we are going to make progress in any issue, for example, the crime rate in the big cities, or even in rural areas, or, I mean, you can name your issue. The fact that there is a possibility now that 1 or 2, 3 judges could be owned, lock, stock, and barrel by members of the big club, that is key. That is key. Now, I'm not saying that any judge in Lansing, Michigan, or in Los Angeles is in any way corrupt. I'm not saying that. And I don't want my channel to get taken down like Harry did. But I am saying that there is enough metadata going through the transcript of the Eugene Yu trial, especially that of November 23rd. There's enough metadata there to force us to look very hard at how things are actually done in our judicial system. Okay? We have to, there's no shortcuts here. There's a lot of work to be done, and either we collectively, not just the Ospreys, but first of all, all the people in Los Angeles County, if there is not a critical mass of LA voters that get together and decide to take a magnifying glass and look very well at the Eugene Yu case, this is a gift from up above. The Eugene Yu case is a gift, and we have to find the people. It can't just be Rick Olson. Come on. We have to get enough people together to keep the pressure on and make sure that they explain themselves, that the prosecutor, from George Gascon and down, explain what the rationale is for doing certain things. Why is it taking another 30 days to de-encrypt this device? What is going on? And why did they give him back his passport if there's still a possibility that he's guilty? We have to take we have to go through the open doors that they open for us. We have to leverage whatever we can in every one of these situations. The other case that needs continued examination by the American people, but especially voters in Ohio, is the European Adoption Consultants case. The transcripts, we have to get hold of those transcripts, especially for the last one, Deborah Parrish, and go line by line through each page of the transcript and find out exactly what the hell's going on there. Because if we do a good job, and I know it's tedious work, you might have to take a few days off of work. If we do a good job, then we can blow open the whole child trafficking scheme, starting in Columbus. Okay, with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok Jr. We have to do that, because that will enable us to expose the SES, the Senior Executive Service, as highly unconstitutional body, and at that point, then we can start to, but hopefully we'll have a little bit of momentum, and we can start to actually get a movement going. All we have right now in the United States are little tactical groups. There is no overall strategy. There is no, we can't call this a movement yet, okay? All we have are tactics at a local level, but they're necessary. They're necessary if we're ever going to arrive at a movement, okay? Anyway, enough for now. Tomorrow I'll cover the organ harvesting and how the Eugene Yu trial is important to the organ harvesting as well. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I'm sorry for the late start. I appreciate all of your letters, all of your emails. Please keep them coming. Help me. First of all, it helps me to stay honest. It keeps me on my toes, and keep doing it. Keep sending me the emails. Force me to dot my I's and cross my T's, and to do the work that needs to be done, so that I and the rest of Research Roadshow can help all of you to do your job better. We are going to win, but it's going to take a lot of work. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm sorry it's taking so long to get to a simple point, but tomorrow I'll be a little bit more organized and do a much better job. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.